I came home early that night. I wanted a quiet dinner. I walked in and heard the tub running. I smiled. I thought it was Christine unwinding. Then I saw him, my sister's husband, in my house, in my bathroom. My breath stopped. My hands shook. The world went slow. The laugh I heard felt wrong. It cut through the house like a knife. My life split into before and after in one heartbeat. I had to decide in that moment what kind of man I would be next. Houston feels like family. Our block smells like frying plantain and coffee on Sunday mornings. Kids ride bikes. Old men sit on porches. Folks know your name. That's where Christine and I built our life. We lived in a modest brick house near the church. The yard had a small oak. The porch light stayed on. Neighbors waved. People brought casseroles when you needed them. Christine and I had rhythms. I got up early, I laced my shoes, I hit the gym. I worked late sometimes. She worked part-time at the clinic and ran her side hustle selling head wraps. We shared chores. She loved the way I brewed coffee. I loved the way she hummed in the kitchen. We were not flashy. We were solid. We were two people with roots. We had friends who doubled as family. My cousin Darnell called on Wednesdays. My mama checked in every Sunday. Inside, our house had warm colors. The living room light was soft. The mattress wore the shape of us. Her perfume lived in the blankets. I knew the small sounds of our life. The click of the kettle, the old clock in the hallway, the way the dog King thumped his tail when I walked in. Silence had its own voice in that house. I liked it most nights. We argued sometimes. We forgave faster. We made room for each other. I believed in us. I trusted her laugh. I trusted her hands. We had plans, a trip one day, a new car, nothing big, just steady things. That evening I left the office early. The sky was tired and pink. I thought of dinner and cheap wine. I called Christine and she said she'd be home in a bit. She sounded light. I imagined her at the sink. I pictured her hair in a towel. I pictured her smile. I opened the gate and heard water. It was a small sound, harmless, but something about the rhythm was off. It didn't fit the home I knew. My steps slowed. My chest tightened. I paused at the door, and then I pushed it open. Mini cliffhanger. A small sound becomes the first sign that everything has changed. At first the changes were tiny. Little things, harmless, or so I thought. Christine started taking longer in the bathroom. She'd say she was relaxing. I noticed new lotions. Scented things I didn't know. She changed her phone password more than once. She began closing tabs on her laptop when I walked by. I made jokes. She smiled, but my gut nudged me. She started brushing off plans. Work ran late, she'd say. Girl stuff, she'd say. She said it like a shield. I began to watch the patterns, a phone vibration at dinner, her voice lifting when she talked on the porch, those little rhymes of secret life. She used to leave her phone face up. Now it lived tucked under a pillow. One weekend, Darnell came by. We sat on the porch and drank tall boys. He asked about Christine. I lied and said she was fine. Guilt tasted like metal. The next week our neighbor Miss Laverne mentioned seeing Christine at a small boutique late at night. I played surprised. I asked questions that sounded casual. Christine's answers were calm. Her eyes flicked away. Her laughter began to have a hollow sound. Not empty, just new, like a mask. I tried to talk to her. "You good?" I asked one evening as she stared at the TV but wasn't watching. She shrugged. "I'm fine." Her voice was flat. I watched her hands. They were careful. She avoided my touch. She would lean away from me in bed. I felt like I was losing a dance I never knew we were in. Then there were small lies. Little slack in time. A missed call with an unknown number. A receipt for a dinner I didn't remember. The dog would growl at the screen door when she came in. She'd tell me it was the neighborhood cat. I would nod and make an excuse for the knot in my chest. One night she left the house before I woke. She said she was going to help her sister. I kissed her forehead. She smelled like the church candles. She left in a hurry. I found a lipstick mark on a napkin later that day. It was Christine. The way the mark sat made my throat tight. I told myself nothing. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself to be the calm man I promised to be. My questions made her shut down. She would say I was accusing her. She called it lack of trust. I kept quiet more. I watched her from across the room like a man in a quiet war. I would study her when she slept. I would check the living room for signs. I learned the language of silence. I learned how to keep from breaking. The tension made the house smaller. Sounds bounced off the walls differently. The clock ticked louder. King stared at doors as if he sensed a new animal in the room. I felt each step she took like a weight. I started leaving late from work more. I pretended to need the extra hours. I sat in my car and wrote notes in a small pad. Dates. Times. Little truths I could use if the world flipped. Once late at night I heard laughter from the bathroom. Not the light, friendly laugh I knew. A different laugh, deep, familiar in a way that hurt. I pressed my ear to the door, silence. Then footsteps. She walked out with a towel and smiled like it was nothing. I smiled back and swallowed the hollowness. When I asked her directly, she snapped. "Why you acting different?" she asked. Her tone was sharp. It was armor on a woman I used to look at without defenses. "You got something to say?" I had nothing but a knot. I said, "I'm worried." She rolled her eyes and left the room. The word worry sounded small in my mouth. It didn't move her. Days passed. The small signs stacked into a pile that could not be ignored. I started to see patterns like constellations. They made a picture of something I did not want to know. I felt my hands tighten on small things. I typed a name into my phone and deleted it. I tried to sleep. My sleep had edges now. I woke with the taste of tension. Then one afternoon I drove by her sister's house on a whim. The car slowed without permission. I watched the porch and the driveway. I saw Christine's car pull up. Her sister's husband, Marcus, came out to meet her. They hugged like folks do, too close. I tried to convince myself it was family. It looked like family. But the way they stood made the air thin. I left before they saw me. That night I lay awake and listened to the house breathe. My chest ached. I wanted proof. I wanted something that would not be only suspicion, only fear. I wanted the truth. But truth is a blade, I knew that. If I pulled it, blood would follow. I reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over her name. I knew the next move would change everything. Mini cliffhanger, I had the pieces. Now I needed the moment to put them together. The house was quiet when I came in that evening. The streetlights painted the living room in long bars. The TV hummed, but no sound. Christine had said she'd be home late. I wanted to believe her. I dropped my bag and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. The tub ran upstairs. The sound was steady. I thought she was soaking. I didn't think twice. I climbed the stairs slow. My shoes felt heavy. The house smelled like warm soap and lemon. I paused at the bathroom door. Steam seeped under. The light was dim. I pushed the door without knocking. The scene hit me like a blow. Christine sat in the tub, hair pinned up, a towel wrapped around her chest. Water lapped at her knees. She looked at me and smiled like the version of her I loved. But that smile was not alone. Beside the tub on a small stool sat Marcus, my sister's husband, his shirt unbuttoned, a towel around his waist. He sat on the edge, his hand on her knee. They were not hidden. They were calm. They were not surprised. They did not leap up like children caught. They met my eyes like men who had rehearsed this moment in some private room. My mouth went dry. My legs trembled. The world narrowed to the two of them in a thin line of tiled floor. My breath came shallow. I felt the pulse in my neck like a drum. The dog began to growl downstairs. The clock in the hallway ticked loud enough to be cruel. Christine tried to stand. Her eyes were quick. "Gary," she said. Her voice was thin. Marcus stood too. He had a man's size and a man's guilt that he tried to hide with composure. He began, and his words hung like bait. I didn't move at first. I watched them like I would watch a play I had not bought a ticket for. My hands found the doorframe. I could feel the paint under my fingers. The tub water reflected light like a small, trembling stage. I remember how the towel around Christine's shoulders looked against her skin, how the steam curled, how ordinary the scene pretended to be. "Why you here?" I said. My voice came out small. It sounded like the voice of a man who still hoped for a joke. "Why you in my house?" My foot inched forward and the floor felt unfamiliar. Marcus spoke and used words that were soft and practiced. "We were just talking," he said. We didn't mean for you to." Christine cut him off. Her hands trembled. "Gary, I can explain." The way she said it told me there was little to explain that would fix the thing that had been broken for months. Anger rose like heat, but it was the ache that hit harder. I felt hollow and full at once. My throat burned. I tasted metal. Tears pressed behind my eyes. I hated the way my body responded. I wanted to shout, to throw things, to make everything roar. Instead, I felt my chest fill with a cold, clean focus. I stepped into the bathroom. The tiles under my feet were cool. The dog's growl came up the stairs and died at the doorway. Christine's face crumpled. She reached for me as if I could be steadied by her hands. I let her touch my sleeve and I felt the lie of warmth. "You hurt me," I said. The words were small bullets. "You made me a fool in my own house." She started to cry in a way that sounded real and practiced at once. Marcus tried to intervene. He reached toward me and I noticed his hand tremble. It was not the hand of a man who wanted to stand tall in a fight. It was a hand that knew it had crossed a line. I asked the simple thing, "How long?" My voice held steady in the way you can only keep steady when your world has split into precise pieces. Christine looked at Marcus and back to me. She could not find the map. She said a few months. Marcus looked away. The word sank like a stone. I felt each month spelled out in a small sound. I thought of the dinners at the table she missed. I thought of the nights she said she was working. I thought of the kisses I had given that had been given to someone else. My body remembered the laugh in the bathroom and it turned to ice. I did not curse. I did not scream. I stepped back and steadied myself on the door. My hands were steady now, but my heart felt as if it had been put in a vice. Part of me wanted to smash everything in the room. Part of me wanted to sit and cry until the water cooled. "You brought him here?" I asked. I wanted to understand the depth. She nodded. Marcus opened his mouth to apologize, but his apology sounded small. They can't build a bridge. They are only words. I left the room then. The stair carpet swallowed my steps. I walked down like a man hollowed out. The porch light felt like daylight. The air outside was sharp and smelled of cut grass. I sat in my car and did not move. I could hear my pulse in the engine. I watched the house through the windshield. The scene replayed behind my eyelids. I thought about what justice looked like. I thought about the kind of man I wanted to be. I wanted to be calm. I wanted strategy. I wanted to be Gary again. But I also wanted something else. I had to choose. Mini cliffhanger. That night, I realized everything was about to change. I didn't act like a man possessed. I acted like a man with a plan. Rage is loud. Strategy is quiet. I chose quiet. First, I breathed. I sat in the car until the night turned blue and the streetlights bled. I watched the house. I watched the light under the blinds. I made a list in my head. Names, dates, times. Small facts that, stitched together, would not be just a story but proof. I started with paper, receipts, bank statements, insurance documents, things that had weight. I opened a new account in my name alone. I moved savings I had hidden for years. I kept a few dollars in joint accounts to avoid suspicion. I sat at the kitchen table and made copies of names, numbers, and dates. I used my phone camera to photograph text messages that I could find. I backed them up to an external drive and hid it in a place no one would look. I watched Christine the way a detective watches a suspect. I kept my calm voice when I spoke to her. I kissed her forehead in front of friends. I put on a smile. I kept playing the loving husband when we left to church or when neighbors stopped by. People commented on how strong I was. They said, "Gary, you are a good man." I let them think that. That became my shield. I reached out to a lawyer I trusted, not to fight yet, to know my options. I learned what it would take to separate finances. I read pages that explained property division. The language was cold but useful. I closed some accounts. I made sure the mortgage was protected. Small changes, no drama, no alarm. I also collected the human proof. I asked Darnell to keep an ear out. I asked Miss Laverne if she could tell me if she saw Marcus around. My cousin checked social media for posts and late check-ins. I did not use force. I used community. I used the fact that our block remembers things. People would tell. I listened. At night I rehearsed what I would say. I practiced calm. I practiced the voice of a man who would not be baited. I did not want a scene where I lost myself. I wanted a scene where she could see the shape of what she had done and the life she had traded for a lie. I wrote down the words I would speak. I stayed away from threats. I used facts. I used dates. I used receipts. I kept everything tidy. One morning I found a thread of messages that confirmed the months. They were not crude. They were small. Memes. Inside jokes. Times of meetups. The evidence was not cinematic porn. It was human. It was phone photos of dinners, small coffee cups, a receipt from a motel on a night Christine said she was at the clinic. The proof was enough. I kept loving her in public. I kept being Gary. I made sure the neighbors still saw us as a couple. That part hurt most. I felt like an actor wearing a mask of ordinary life while my insides were remodeling themselves into something different. King, the dog, stayed close to me. He knew when I was tired. I slept on the couch a few nights to give distance. My hands moved through these days like a man building a slow machine. I opened accounts in my name and set small transfers that would not trigger questions. I changed passwords and set up a safety net for my children if we had any plans for kids for the future. I took control of the small details that make life function. Bank auto payments, car titles, utility accounts. The mundane turned into armor. I saw Christine's face narrow when she noticed new locks on some files. She accused me of being controlling. I smiled. I said, "I'm just organizing." The phrase tasted like copper. Friends asked if I wanted to talk. I told a few truths carefully. I did not tell them everything. A few people owed me loyalty. They helped. They watched Marcus. One afternoon, Marcus got a call and left in a hurry. He avoided eye contact at the corner store. Little things made me feel like the world was tilting back toward balance. Inside, I fought with forgiveness. I wanted to forgive. I wanted to be the man my mama raised. But betrayal wound itself through the house like smoke that never leaves. Each time I saw Christine laughing with Marcus in public, it stung. Each time she touched my arm, I felt the past and the present collide. The plan grew. I would not humiliate her on the porch. I would not throw plates. I wanted movement that would make the truth have consequence. I wanted her to lose the advantage of hiding behind family and sympathy. I wanted legal clarity. I wanted to walk away with integrity and with what I had earned. So I waited for the right day. I waited for a moment where her guard would be down. I decided the confrontation would be public enough to prevent lies, private enough to keep dignity. I would show the evidence in a controlled way. I would make sure the community saw it as truth and not gossip. I thought of the church. I thought of the block. I decided to gather facts, witnesses, and a calm voice. Every night I rehearsed. I folded my hurt into a coat of resolve. I let the anger be a tool and not a wildfire. That cold focus kept me from doing something I would regret. I watched the house and the people in it. I prepared. The day I chose to confront her, I was no longer the same man. Mini cliffhanger. The day I chose to confront her was the day I stepped out of the man she thought I was. I picked a normal evening. Not special. Not dramatic, just a Tuesday. I came home with flowers. Not because I thought it would fix anything. Because I wanted to hold the image of a man who tries. I wanted the contrast. Christine answered in a dress, surprised. Marcus had been at her sister. He was not there. The house smelled like dinner. I set the flowers down in their vase like an actor on stage. King wagged his tail. I felt the pulse in my neck but kept it steady. Friends were coming over for a small dominoes night. I had told Darnell to arrive early. We sat, we joked. The room felt like our old life for a moment. I watched Christine as she moved. She laughed. I kept my hands in my lap. I let the conversation flow. I was quiet. People asked if everything was okay. I said yes. I felt the weight of my silence. When the moment came, I didn't rise in anger. I stood and asked for the room to be quiet. People looked at me. I made a small joke to lower the temperature, then I pulled out my phone. I told them simply, I have something to share. My voice was calm. The calmness made heads lean in. I showed them the messages, I showed photos, I showed receipts, I showed dates. The room inhaled like one body. Christine's face went from color to pale. She looked at me with a kind of animal panic. "Gary, you can't," she started. Her voice was small. I let the evidence speak. It did not need my anger to be loud. It did not need my pleading. The community looked. Darnell's jaw clenched. Miss Lavern's eyes turned hard. Neighbors who had known us for years shifted in their seats. The weight of the proof rearranged the room. Christine tried to jab with words. "This is private." She bit at the edges of the facts like someone trying to chew truth into something it was. Marcus called from outside. I ignored the ring. He stood at the door like a man waiting for a verdict. I kept my composure. That was my power then, the refusal to give them the drama they expected. "Why?" I asked her softly, not to accuse, to understand the fissure that had opened under us. She could not look at me, her shoulders shook. She started to cry and speak at once. "I'm sorry, I'm lost. I didn't mean." Her apologies came like spilled coins. They clattered without value. People murmured. Someone said, "Chris," and stopped. The cultural weight in the room was heavy. In our community, marriage is serious. Family is serious. Loyalty is spoken about like a code. You don't break it without consequences. I felt those consequences in the looks thrown our way. I asked for Marcus to come in. He stood at the doorway, hat in his hands. He tried to say something. He asked me to forgive him. He looked small in that moment. His wife, my sister, was away that week. The betrayal had spread its nets wider than just me and Christine. Christine tried to pull me aside. "Let's talk in private," she begged. The room watched. I said no. Not because I wanted to shame her, not to hurt her, but because secrets had been traded for comfort and I wanted public truth. I wanted witness. She stood and her hands trembled. "I never meant for you to find out like this," she said. Her voice broke. I thought about the nights I had chosen to be quiet. I thought about the money I had saved and the nights I had slept on the couch to breathe. I thought about the life we had built with our hands. The betrayal had cost me more than comfort. It had cost me the sense of safety. "I want you to know how this hurts me," I said. My voice had the softness of a river. "But I want the truth first, then I'll decide." She crumpled and told the story in small pieces. How it started with long text threads. How it grew into meetups. How she got angry at me for petty things and found someone who listened. Her words were a confession and a plea. At one point she looked at Marcus and said, "We didn't mean to hurt him." Marcus looked at me and said, "I was weak." I looked at them both and saw not monsters but people who had made choices. In that my anger shifted. It became a legal clarity. It became a list. I told them what I would do. I would separate. I would not be publicly violent or loud. I would make sure truth had consequences. I would involve the lawyer if needed. I would secure the house. I would inform family. I would not allow them to hide behind charm. They realized then they had already lost something heavier than just a home. They had lost trust and the support of the community. Christine's knees went weak. She sat down like a child. The room hummed with the electricity of finality. She knew she had already lost. Mini cliffhanger. In the hush that followed, everyone felt the cost of what had been broken. The next weeks were quiet in a different way. The neighborhood watched but did not pry too loud. News travels in whispers here. My actions were deliberate and precise. I did not seek to destroy. I sought to reclaim. The plan I had made worked like a slow machine. Legally, I protected my assets. The lawyer handled the paperwork. I took what belonged to me. I did not take to humiliating her on social media. I refused to fuel gossip. The court papers were clean, respectful, and firm. When property lines were drawn, I kept the house and moved her out with dignity. I paid what I owed. I did not revel in her loss. That is not revenge. That is justice. Marcus faced the hardest fallout. His marriage broke open in front of the family. My sister found out. This is the worst part of betrayal, the ripple. Families who had stood at our table now took sides. Some cut off Christine and him. Others tried to mediate. The church elders talked about betrayal in the small, private rooms that gossip uses. People whispered. Some said I was cold, others said I was strong. A few brought over plates. Darnell sat with me more nights. He didn't ask me to be anything I was, he let me be quiet. He walked with me when I needed steps. The community's reaction was a mix of sympathy and judgment. I accepted both. Christine's world narrowed. She moved into a small apartment. The headrap hustle slowed. She lost financial stability. Marcus' job felt the pressure. He stopped coming around. Regret visits people in different ways. For Christine, it came slow. She sent a few messages asking to talk. I answered with boundaries. I felt complex things. I did not dance on their ruin. I felt sorrow for the family torn. I felt relief for the end of secret nights. I felt grief for the man I thought I was, who had been naive to the cracks. I learned how to be alone inside a house filled with echoes. Months later, I packed a small duffel. I drove out of town for a week. I watched the sunrise over an empty highway. The sky turned from purple to gold. I played old songs and cried alone in my car. That morning, I let everything I had held go. The grief loosened its grip a little. I felt my shoulders come down. I felt breath that was not sharp. When I came back, the neighborhood had moved as it does. Life continued. People waved. I waved back. I started going to the gym more. I reconnected with friends. I took small steps, a haircut, a dinner with Darnell, a Sunday at church where I sat in the back and listened. I rebuilt the life in small acts. The last time I saw Christine, we met in a neutral place. No drama. We talked like adults. She apologized again, and I heard the weight in the words. I forgave her quietly, not for her sake but for mine. Forgiveness was the step that let me stop carrying the burning coals. I walked away stronger. The revenge I sought was not about breaking her. It was about reclaiming my dignity. It was about setting boundaries and refusing to let lies stand. I did not gloat. I did not explode. I walked with my head up. One night I drove past the house. The porch light was dark. The oak stood steady. The house felt smaller but honest. I drove on into a night that smelled like rain. The hurt remained, but it no longer owned me. The community watched. The story passed into the chorus of neighborhood tales, but I kept my peace. There is a quiet victory in protecting what you built and leaving the rest with honesty. I took back what was mine, my home, my finances, and my pride. I lost a marriage, but I found myself again. Mini cliffhanger. The payoff was not revenge as spectacle. It was the slow return of my peace. If you are watching this and you are hurting, know this: pain sharpens you if you let it. Don't let it make you reckless. I learned that being calm is its own power. I learned to collect facts, not rumors. I learned to protect what I built. I learned to use community for truth, not for spectacle. Love is a brave thing, so is leaving. So is staying with your dignity intact. You can be angry and still be a good man. You can be hurt and still act with honor. I am not proud of how I felt sometimes. I am proud of how I moved. If betrayal happens, take slow steps. Breathe, gather what you need, get wise counsel, protect your children and your future. Forgive when you are ready. Walk away when you must. I am Gary. I came home early. I found the truth. I took my life back. You can too.